this course, you will learn how to use your web hosting panel, which is actually called cPanel, the one that majority of web hosting companies use. We're going to show you how to use it effectively to run your website. What I've seen over the years is a lot of people tend to forget how powerful the cPanel really is. In doing so, they often go about buying fancy scripts that cost a lot of money and don't realize that they can use the cPanel for free to do the exact same thing. So, the premise for this course is this. There are so many cPanel videos out there that cover basic features of cPanel, but the problem is they never really dive into the core of what cPanel really offers. That is my goal in this video course, as it is not only going to show you the features of cPanel that you can use for your website, but also parts of it that can really help you truly take your business to the next level of success. This course is not just about maintaining your website and having email accounts or things like that, but really taking it to the next step. You know, there are many different situations beyond just the basics. I want to make sure that I cover everything so that you're aware and you protect yourself from overspending to other scripts. So, in order to get started, obviously what you're going to need to have is cPanel. So with that said, let's move on to the next lesson. I wish you a happy learning. Hello and welcome back. Today, we're going to talk about how to use the video tutorials feature, or how to get access to the video tutorials. We'll talk a little bit more about the layout and all that so that we can get on the same page. Not all cPanel users are aware that you can actually get access to the video tutorials that come together with cPanel. cPanel itself actually offers you a lot of basic tutorials within its website, so that you'll get access to understanding of using features. You don't need to think or figure out how do you use this feature, or how do you use that feature, because we're not going to be able to cover every single feature in this video course. So you need to check out those tutorials too. In fact, what we're trying to do in this course is cover videos that are really not covered often, more in-depth views, rather than just how to use cPanel in general. Once you log in with cPanel, what you need to do is scroll all the way down to the bottom and click on Documentation. At this page, you will be able to access the video tutorials. As you can see, there are a variety of different types of documentation, like videos and written documentation. In the past, cPanel would add the video tutorials in the side of the cPanel, but now it is actually on the outside. I want to make sure that you understand that so you know where to go if you ever need to get access to some basic video training. Now, what I also want to mention is the user interface. Some of you will have different user interface than what you're seeing on the screen here, and that typically is because of the style of a hosting company. You can actually change the style. Most of you will have something that looks like this, and it really depends on your web hosting company. Some web hosting companies will actually customize the cPanel with their own user interface, with their own icons and all of that. What actually holds true and stays the same is the actual words on the sections and on the actual icons. The icons sometimes will be slightly different. The reason why I'm mentioning this to you is because some people might be confused because their interface looks a little bit different for them. What you can do is, up at the top, you can click on this little button here and click on Change Style. If you click this, you'll be sent to this page. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit more so that you can see it much clearer. So, there are different styles and different skins, as we call them, and the basic one looks like this. Then, we have the dark version. But, if you'll notice, the icons are very similar and very much the same. The only difference is the background. The light version is the same as well. I would say the majority of you probably have something like this. Now, this is the very old style. Some of you will have this as well, and you'll see this, but at the end of the day, it's all the same. However, if you notice, the similarities are the section name and then, of course, the actual name of the option. So, for example, File Manager will always be File Manager and so forth. So, like I said, depending on the style that you choose, it might look slightly different. But at the end of the day, typically the things that do not change are the actual titles of the options. File Manager is going to be File Manager across the board. You're going to see different sections. Some of these sections will be different. Some, as you can see, you can actually move around. I can move this section further down here. Just keep in mind that yours might be a little bit lower or yours might be higher. Really, depending on the web hosting company, some will leave it at default and some will get all fancy and move things around and customize it with their own logo. But it's all the same thing at the end of the day, unless you're using a web hosting company that is not using cPanel, which are very few. So let me just run through this real quick. You have files, you have File Manager, you have images, and you have directory privacy, which enables you to tell the system who can actually access certain directories. We have FTP accounts, and we have Backup Wizard, which we'll show you how to use later on. We have disk usage here. That shows you how much disk space you have left. Then, of course, you have databases, which is PHP-MyAdmin, and which is where you're going to actually look at the database. But you'll need to create a database first, which you can do either here or here. You don't really need these options here as these are for advanced users. Then, you have domain names such as Site Publisher, add-on domains, subdomains, redirects, and more. We're not really going to cover this, but subdomains, as you know, it's basically adding a keyword .yourdomain.com. So it's going to be a subdomain of the domain. Then, of course, you have email. You're going to be able to create email accounts here. You're going to be able to create autoresponders, and in this case, the autoresponder is just going to respond with an email. So, you could set up an email address and tell people to email you to this address, and you'll be sent an automatic response, like an email with a secret code or something. You could also forward all emails from one email to another email here. We have email authentication, which we'll talk about more later. We'll have Spam Assassin, which will enable you to protect your email address from spam. Then we have metrics like AW stats. There are other metrics as well, but these are different types of stats. Then of course, you have security. IP Blocker allows you to block IP addresses, and Hotlink Protection is great as well. So, if you click on Hotlink Protection, what this will allow you to do is, for example, if you've uploaded a bunch of zip files and don't want so-and-so, let's say some website linking to the zip files of yours and then getting people to download the zip files, then you can actually prevent other websites from linking to you and essentially using up your bandwidth. Then you have software. The majority of these you will not really use. You will run into Soft Oculus, which we'll talk about later down the road. Then of course, you have advanced options like cron jobs, which you will usually set up when you install a web script, and all these other things you won't really use as much. You will use error pages, which we'll show you in a different video as well. Then we've got preferences, which is where you just change style, change language, and all of that, and change your password. And then of course, you have Soft Oculus. Hello and welcome back. Today, we're going to talk about how to create a MySQL database. Then, we'll talk about, in addition to that, how to insert data into a MySQL database, how to look at database, and how to understand the basics of it so that if you ever need to do this in the future, you can. When it comes to installing a MySQL database, it's actually a very easy thing to do. It's simply click and few other clicks and you're done. I'll show you exactly the step-by-step process of doing that. However, that said, how do you go about inserting data into the database if you ever need to do that? This is often underutilized, but needed in the long term whenever you're running a website. So, that's it. Let me go ahead and show you how. To create a MySQL database is super easy. Let's start at the top. Make sure that you're logged into your cPanel, and what you want to do is scroll downwards and look for databases. If it's different, then basically what you want to do is look for the MySQL database wizard, and this will walk you through step by step. It's the easiest way to go. So, first things first, click on this. And then, the system is going to ask you what you want to name your database. Now, This right here is going to be your domain name. Domain is going to be different for different people, and you don't have to worry about that. Just enter a database name. We'll say DB, that stands for database. And this could be anything you want. You just need to remember what it is. Then click on Next Step. Then you want to create a username. So the username or the user has access to the database. So this is separate. You're creating a username and then you're creating a separate database. All right, so let's put that in here. We'll just say user1. Then of course, you want to create a password. What we'll usually like to do is click on Password Generator, because then you can get a very complex password. You can click Generate Password here and create a random password, and we'll copy it down here. So once you're done with that, you just click on the checkbox that says, I've copied this into a safe place and I'm ready to use the password. Then it automatically enters it here. As you can see, it is a very strong password, and we click Create User. Step 3 is to add the user to the database, and to do that, all we have to do is click on All Privileges and click Next Step. That's it. Now, what you need to do is hopefully you have saved the password to a very safe place. Usually what I do is I open up Notepad and I save my password there. If you are installing a web script, typically, what it will do is ask you for your database name, and the database name is the full text between these quotation marks. So I'm going to copy that over here. That's the database name. I usually do DB equals this, and then the user equals this, and keep that in a safe place. As you can see, that's how easy it is to create a MySQL database. Now, what I want to do is click on Return to MySQL Databases, and if we scroll down, we can see that the database has been created. Now, I go back to the outside here, and I'm going to click on the logo, and that just brings me back to the home page. I'm going to go back down and look for PHP MyAdmin. What this allows you to do is to take a peek at the database itself. I will warn you, and I will say do this very cautiously, because any mess up could potentially mess up your whole site. But I wanted to show you this because sometimes, if you have basic detective skills, you'll be able to kind of get an idea of what's going on inside the database. If you click on PHP MyAdmin, it will open up and it will allow us to edit specific databases. Obviously, you want to find the database that you just named. So in this case, it was the DB base. It's this one right here. Then we can click here. So we can see that there are no tables found. That's the reason why it's an empty database, right? But let's say, for example, that we choose a different database that has data inside of it. So what I've done is I've gone into a WordPress site database. In this case, I'm not going to show you the username and password and all that, but I want to show you some of the basics. So whenever you install a WordPress site, for example, it will have you install plugins and all that. And sometimes we'll see plugin database tables inside of here. So sometimes you can actually edit the data that is inside of these tables. But if you're just curious, then come in and take a look, see what happens, and see inside of it. Obviously, I would be very careful if you are adding a site that you really care about. But by doing this and just looking at it, not really changing anything, this really gives you an idea of what is happening on the back end of your website. The reason why I'm showing this to you is because we used to do this in the past. So whenever we came across an error, or maybe something on the site that I couldn't change on the front end, then sometimes I would go to the back end, like right here, to correct errors for WP comments, for example. You could see comments and all that here. So what I'm showing, you can actually replace existing data with data that you want. And just coming through here and being able to see what's happening on the back end really shows you to see what is happening on your site. This is very useful to know, especially if you get locked out of your website and you have to change your username and password and it just won't let you in. So what you could easily do is you can come down here and go under users and then just change the password inside here. That's why I'm showing you this, because there are potential opportunities in the future. If something bad happens, you could potentially come in and get things fixed. But obviously, If you don't know what you're doing, then you will need to consult someone that does. Hopefully, that gives you a better understanding on how MySQL databases work when you create them. Then, when things begin to populate, everything happens right here.